The next thing I'm going to demonstrate is how to edit sampler data in the toolbox. And what's different about sampler data as opposed to personnel and site data is that you cannot use the same form that you use to add your sampler data. There's a whole different set of forms for editing your sampler data. And those forms are not something that new users do on a routine basis. So you can't access those forms from the new user's fast track. So what I need to do is close the new user's fast track. And I can do that by clicking on the exit form button that's in the upper right corner of the form. So I'll go ahead and do that. And now I'm back to the opening screen of the toolbox. And for editing sampler data, I have to work from the main switchboard. And that's the fourth option in that list. So I'll go ahead and click on Work from Main Switchboard. And this opens up the main switchboard of the toolbox. And up until this version of the toolbox, this used to be the opening form of the toolbox. So any of the functions in the toolbox, even those that you cannot access from the new user's fast track form, you can access from the main switchboard. To get to the place where we can edit sampler data, I need to click on this first pink button here, the Add or Modify Personnel Site and Sampler Information button. So I do that. And that brings up this form that you've seen, but we've been closing up until now because we haven't needed to use it. So what I want to do is click on the Modify Existing Sampler Information button. And that opens up this form where I need to select what sampler I need to modify. The sampler I need to modify is the INPM 2.5 sampler. And the reason I need to modify is that because my manager came to me right after I had entered my data for the site and samplers into the toolbox and says, hey, I'm moving the PM 2.5 sampler over to site S98, okay? And I'm like, oh no, I just entered that data into the toolbox and I'm going to have to fix it. So now let's go ahead and select INPM 2.5 and we're going to click on the OK button. If that was the wrong sampler, I would click on Clear Selection to undo this. But this is the correct selection, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And this brings up this form. So this shows the current sampler location for the PM 2.5 sampler, and it shows that it's located at S46. And now, when I move the sampler, I have to fill in these yellow fields. And I also need to fill in these blue fields because I moved the sampler to a new site. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I am the one making these changes. And I need to enter the date that the sampler was moved. And it asks, was the sampler moved to a new monitoring site in your AIR program? And yes, it was moved. If it had been taken out of the field due to a maintenance issue, I would select no. But since it is moved, I'm going to click yes. If it was taken out of the field for maintenance, I wouldn't need to fill in these blue fields here because this is about where the sampler was moved to. But since it was moved to a new site, I need to fill out those blue fields as well as these yellow fields. I don't have any comments to enter, and the new site the sampler was moved to, it has a drop-down arrow, so I'll go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to select site S98 because that's where the sampler now is. And it was placed there on that same day. And now I have these three buttons on the bottom of the form. This first button on the left here, Update Sampler Location and Continue Sampler Changes, is if you had more than one sampler you needed to change. The next button, Update Sampler Location and Exit Form, is if you only had the one sampler, like I do, that you needed to change. The exit form without making any changes to sampler location is if you made an error and you want to start from scratch. You would click on that button. But I need to use this middle button here, Update Sampler Location and Exit Form, so I'll click on that. And it closes the form, and it made the changes for me. So that is how you edit your sampler data in the toolbox. And now we're back on the main switchboard. And the next thing I want to demonstrate is that my Air Program Manager asked me to give her a report of the data that I've entered into the toolbox so far for my personnel, my site, and my sampler. And she wants that information printed out to make sure I entered it correctly. So there is a report in the toolbox that will do that for you. And there's two ways to access that form. You can access it from the main switchboard using this pink button here. But since I'm demonstrating the fast track options, I'd like to show you how to do that using the fast track. So to get back to the fast track, I click here for the toolbox wizard, and that will take me back to the opening screen of the toolbox. So I'm going to make this form smaller. And I'm going to go back to the new user's fast track form, that first option. And now, on the very bottom of the list here, is the View Site and Sampler Inventory Report. I am going to mention this before we go on, that this button, this fourth button here, Add AQS Sampler Method, is something we're going to go over in a future module. And that's where you add your sampling methodology data to the toolbox. And I don't have that right now, and you probably, or you might have it, but you might not have it either. And that's okay, because we can add that at a later date. So we're going to skip this different colored button here for now. And we're going to take a look at the View Site and Sampler Inventory Report, so I'll click on that button. So this shows the Site and Sampler Inventory Report, and as you can see, it's kind of small. And when I mouse over the report, you'll see that my cursor turns into a magnifying glass with a plus sign in it. And if I click on the report, that's going to zoom in on the report, so I'll go ahead and do that. And that kind of messes it up a little bit. So I'm going to use this button here to maximize the report. And then I can move over and look at it. And if I wanted to minimize it again, I can mouse over, and you'll see that the cursor turns to a magnifying glass with a minus sign in it. So if I click on that, it makes it small again. So you can play around with that. So this report is organized by site. So the first site, S46, shows all of the samplers that were either at this site or at one time were at this site. So you'll see that INPM25 was once at this site. You can tell that it's been moved because it says date sampler moved from site was on January 2nd, 2015. But these other ones, my MET sampler and my ozone sampler, their date sampler moved from site is empty. So those samplers are still at that site. So if I scroll down, I can see my PM 2.5 monitor is now located at site S98 because the date sampler moved from site field is blank. And I can use the print button here to print this out and give it to my Air Program Manager. So I can do that. And if I want to exit from this report, I use this button here, the Close Print Preview button, and that will take me out of the report. So I'll go ahead and do that since I'm done looking at the report for now. And that takes me back to the new user's fast track form. So I am done working with the toolbox for now. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. So the first thing I want to do is close my forms, because I like to have everything closed when I close the toolbox. So I click on this Exit Form button to close this form, and then I can't close the opening screen of the toolbox. So I'm just going to go ahead and close the entire database. And to do that, I use the X button here that's on the very upper right corner of your screen, and if you mouse over it, it says Close. So I'll click on that button, and that's going to close the entire toolbox. And that is it. That shows you how to enter your administrative data into the toolbox. And the homework is to go ahead and enter your personnel, your site, and your sampler data into the toolbox for your air monitoring program. And then you need to run the sampler inventory report like I just did, and either print it to file or take a screen capture of the report and email it to your instructors.